Well, hello everybody. It's Heath Robinson with Topaz Labs. Excited to be bringing you the updated introduction to AI Gigapixel with Greg Rostami. Many of you may have run into Greg at trade shows. He's been representing Topaz Labs. Started working with us over 10 years ago as a product evangelist. He's an avid close-up magician. He combines his love of technology and magic to create Rostami Magic, which has been one of the most popular apps for iOS and Android. He's developed several technologies for film restoration, 3D visual effects, and other digital pipelines that have spawned a new generation of post-production services. Greg partnered with Topaz over a shared love of powerful visual arts technology and tools that empower users to create art their way. If you're having any audio or video issues during the presentation, sometimes audio will cut out or video will cut out, try logging out and logging back in. We do have the 2,000 attendee level cap, so you don't have to worry about not being able to get back in. Logging out, logging back in usually clears up those buffer issues. If you're still having any other issues, please try closing any applications that might be using a lot of memory on your computer or Flash Player. If you're trying to use Photoshop and Studio and watch the webinar, it's probably going to slow everything down quite a bit. And don't forget to stick around after the presentation for a short Q&A with Greg and to see if you're one of the winners of the 2 copies of AI Gigapixel that we'll be giving away at the end of the presentation. We pull winners from attendees, so don't leave. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Greg. Greg, are you ready?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Heath. Thank you, Rose, for that wonderful introduction. So the main question is, what will you do with 3,600% more? 3,600% more pixels is, of course, what we're talking about. And in this presentation, I'm going to go over exactly what that means and what are some of the applications of being able to have so much more resolution. And all of this is due to the ability that Topaz Gigapixel, AI Gigapixel has with the AI imagination in creating more resolution. Now, just to start things off, I want to give you a little bit of a visual clue as to what 3,600% more looks like. So if you're starting off, let's say, with an image that is only 4 inches by 3 inches at 300 dpi, essentially, this is all you have, right? There's nothing else. Those are all the pixels that you have available to you. Whereas after AI Gigapixel is done with the image, as I zoom away from it here, you notice that now it is 6 times or 600% bigger, both horizontally and vertically. So now it is at 24 inches by 18 inches at 300 dpi or 300 ppi. And as we get close, I want to show you really what sets AI Gigapixel apart from every other method of enlarging. This is the information that we're starting off with. This is just the raw pixels that we have. And of course, this is what AI Gigapixel has created from that information. And what's amazing about these AI imagination is that it can actually imagine that it sees the tiny pores or the wrinkles that would normally be in skin. Or even if you look up in the upper right-hand corner over here at our hair, when we look at the original image, you really can't see the real subtle details that are in her hair. Whereas now, after AI Gigapixel, the subtle lines of detail that are on the skin as it gets closer to the forehead are realized because of the neural network being trained with so many images. So what I want to now do for you is kind of like just take you through a typical workflow for AI Gigapixel and how you can use this kind of a technology as a way of telling a new story with your images. I love this photo, mainly because the monkey looking at his own reflection in the mirror is really cool. But I want to tell a completely different story just by cropping it. So we're going to pick it up. And as we crop closer to the photo, I'm going to make sure that I don't get any of the frame of the mirror in the shot. So right after you get close to that point where you can't see any more of the frame of the mirror, and you do a crop right here, boom. Now suddenly we're telling a completely different story because now it looks like 2 monkeys that are interacting with one another because we really can't see the mirror anymore, right? So at this point, you just simply save out this file. So I'm gonna, in this case, save this out as, let's just call this one here, monkey low R. Save it as PSD is fine. And at this point, you can open up Topaz AI Gigapixel to actually process this file. Now, I've already done that from before. So once AI Gigapixel runs, here is how you actually introduce images into AI Gigapixel. Let me first find my drive that I had my images in. So let me navigate over to those. Topaz images right here at the top, Gigapixel, and here's the monkey low image. So now you're going to see how it shows you that image here up on the top. And within AI Gigapixel, you can not only bring in a single image, or you can actually bring in a whole set of images. So as I look through these images, I can actually hold down my command key as I click on just a few different images here that I would want to process. And so now when I click open, okay, you'll be able to see that now these other images have been introduced into the workspace as well. So this allows you to actually batch process as many images as you like. So this is actually as far as bringing the images in. And the other thing that I love about it is that anytime you want to just kind of quickly preview an image, you can double click on it, and it will open up whatever is the default image preview program that you have on your computer. And in my case, on my Mac, it's just the preview function of the Mac, so you can actually see that image. And then once you're satisfied with the images that you have in your pipeline or the batch process you're going to do, in the upper right-hand corner, you can either enlarge these images by a predefined scale, or you can very specifically specify a size. So the size can go up to 50,000 pixels by 50,000 pixels, which is a very, very large resolution file, but that is the limit of AI Gigapixel. And I traditionally like to use it with just a quick presets of either the 150, 200, 400, or 600% in the upscaling. Right below the enlarge options, we can see that there is a toggle here, a switch for enhancing images that are low quality or noisy. And this feature truly is a miracle for either noised or compressed images. And we're going to see that a little bit later on in this presentation as well. As we come further down, as far as the output format goes, you can choose to either go out as a JPEG file, TIFF, or PNGs. As far as the input goes, we support a variety of formats, not only including the formats that are here. AI Gigapixel even supports PSD files as well. Usually when I do an upscale, I like to maintain the bit depth actually at 16 bits per channel. And this is really another amazing aspect of Gigapixel, is not only is it going to increase your resolution, it can actually increase the dynamic range of your photos as well in being able to create a larger number of bits per channel or bits per pixel. And then finally, at the bottom where we are under the output name and location, I'm going to specify that I want this to just simply go out to the same place, meaning the same folder that it came from, or you can turn that off and actually specify exactly where you want your processed images to end up. And this is great if you are processing, a lot of photographs and you simply want to organize them to go to a different folder. And then finally, file suffix. In this case, it's going to just add an output or an underscore output to the end of the file. And when you're satisfied with it, this is when you actually click on the start button and AI Gigapixel starts doing the processing. Now, I've already done this from before because I wanted to just quickly show you how it all works. So let me show you what the final result looks like. Here we go. I call this one the monkeys compare. There we go. So here's what happened when we originally brought the image into AI Gigapixel. We have low resolution. I'm going to get really, really close over here so you can see all the pixels that make up, in this case, the eyelashes of this monkey. And now here is AI Gigapixel. Now, this is where things get really interesting, because if you look at the original file, if you kind of squint your eyes, you might imagine that there are these individual eyelashes that are in between these pixels of information. But sure enough, AI Gigapixel's imagination also saw these fine little lines of detail. And this imagination actually extends to every part of how it upscales your photos. So as we look across, let's say, the front of the skin right in front of the eye, once again, in the low resolution image, we really can't see the fine wrinkles that would be on the skin of the monkey, whereas the neural network, because it has been trained with literally thousands and thousands, and actually it's been trained with millions of photos, it has learned how to reproduce and imagine these fine, subtle details. Now, since we're looking at what AI Gigapixel does, just as a quick display or comparison to some of the latest technologies in upscaling, I want you to see what would happen with the latest version of Photoshop's Preserve Details 2.0. So if you do have the latest version of Photoshop, it does have a technology for upscaling your photos. That does a pretty okay job. But as we look at, first of all, the eyelash areas. Now keep in mind, very low resolution, we really can't see the eyelashes. This is Photoshop's upscaler with the new Preserve Details 2.0, and it's not seeing those final little details that are there actually, that AI Gigapixel finds perfectly. The other thing that I noticed when I started playing around with Preserve Details is that the resulting image sometimes was noisy because it really didn't look at some of the low resolution information, and as it was upscaling, it really wasn't representing those smooth gradients correctly. Whereas when you compare that to AI Gigapixel, you can see that AI Gigapixel represents these smooth gradients very naturally, beautifully, and so you don't get this very noisy kind of artifact, as you can see there. So just as a little quick before and after, I'll even go down here to the whiskers, because the whiskers are always these fine details that other upscaling products have problems with. So once again, here's the low resolution, and here is AI Gigapixel. And then finally, here's what happens when you're using just a Preserve Details in Photoshop. In general, you're going to notice that the Preserve Details in Photoshop tends to make lines thicker and blurrier than what AI Gigapixel does. Gigapixel is going to kind of like naturally find the correct thickness and the correct shape, always to the point where it's so close to the original information if you actually had that original file. All right. So now that we looked at what happens when you're trying to tell a new story from a photograph, let's take a look at a few other examples. They're going to really highlight how AI Gigapixel compares with all of the other upscaling methods that are out there. Usually when somebody is talking about upscaling, they usually zoom in really close on the eye. So here I am on the close to, so close where we can see all the pixels that are in this image. And first, here is just normal Photoshop bicubic interpolation. So what that means is essentially Photoshop is taking the pixels and it's kind of softening them. So this is the kind of stuff that Photoshop used to do for decades, just using traditional bicubic interpolation methods. So here is now the new Photoshop Preserve Details 2.0, which is doing a pretty good job. It's definitely better than what it was before when it was so soft and blurry. And then here is the latest version of On1's fractal upreser. Okay, as we get close to here, we can see that one of the problems with fractal upresing is that it will leave you with these strange kind of like triangular or pentagonal shapes as it upreses. And then finally, here is AI Gigapixel. Now, what I'm going to do is kind of give you a before and after of each one of these, just so you can see how AI Gigapixel compares with each of these different technologies. So starting from the beginning, here is, of course, just traditional bicubic interpolation, which is very soft. Here's AI Gigapixel. If you look at how soft the original image is, especially when you look at areas of detail like the cloth that she has that's going across her forehead. It's just very, very soft. Whereas when you look at what AI Gigapixel does with that information, it actually recreates the patterns and the details that are in the cloth that cannot be seen in this blurred version. And then that same applies for when we are comparing it to the latest version of Photoshop's Preserve Details. As we look at Preserve Details now, again, even though it's trying to kind of sharpen those soft areas, it is in no way comparable to the amazing level of detail that AI Gigapixel introduces into those detailed areas. Finally, as we look at the eye of our subject, especially the eyelashes, one of the common problems that people complain about in Preserve Details is it often will leave you with these ringing artifacts. So if you look at that individual strand of eyelash that's there, you can see how there seems to be kind of like these shadowed lines that are around it. Whereas in contrast, when you look at AI Gigapixel, that is very, very natural. There are no artifacts, and it has represented that eyelash. Now, I just wanted to show that to you quickly, just so you understand where all of this stuff is coming from, because it is the major wow moment when you realize this is all that we've got, and this is, of course, once again, what AI Gigapixel does with it. And then finally, as we compare once again back to On1's fractal-based upresser, we could see that the fractal-based upresing is going to leave you with these kind of like jagged or painterly is probably the best way to describe the kind of upresing that fractal algorithms do, whereas the results from AI Gigapixel are always very, very natural. It literally looks like it was actually acquired at that resolution, even though we know better that it was super low res. One last bit of detail I want to highlight about this particular photo is this area right here. Okay, as we look at the center of the screen, if you kind of squint your eyes, you might imagine that because you could see that there's eyelashes there, that it seems as if there are multiple eyelashes over here. Without your imagination actually is pretty close to what AI Gigapixel sees there as well, because AI Gigapixel actually thinks that there are about 3 different eyelashes that are there. Remember, this is where we're starting from. This is where we are now. And again, that's a pretty major wow moment when you realize that it's actually correctly interpreting that that thickness there should only be multiple eyelashes that would come from the same area. All right. So now as we move on to one last comparison between AI Gigapixel and the other leading upscaling technologies out there. It's probably one of the first images that I upscaled using AI Gigapixel. Again, I'm going to get really, really close to some of the subtle details, especially when you look at the wrinkles that are here under the parrot's face. So we can see the eye, we can see the little tiny wrinkles that are there. And I'm just going to quickly cut to the chase here and show you AI Gigapixel. That is AI Gigapixel. Now, what's unique about this particular upscale is that this is 10 times the original size. Now remember, AI Gigapixel had a preset for 600%. You don't have to use that 600%. If you wanted to type in a larger number, you could. Or if you want to use AI Gigapixel a couple of times, maybe upscale it first twice and then upscale it again 6 times, it can actually give you higher resolutions by upscaling it twice. So here's the before, where we have this is the after. This is actually AI Gigapixel. Here is the low resolution information. As we look at this image, it's so hard to imagine the little wrinkles and the details that are there in this very, very low-res file, whereas AI Gigapixel actually is finding all of these details perfectly. Now, where things get really interesting is when you start comparing AI Gigapixel actually to the original information that's there. So what I did do with this image is I started out with a very, very high-res photograph, and I downscaled it a lot, so it was practically 1/10 of its original size, and then I upscaled that image using AI Gigapixel. So as we go back and forth between, keep in mind that what you're looking at right now is starting from this very, very low resolution information, which means it is 1/100th the information that we need for the final resolution. And this is what it's doing with it. And we could see that obviously it's not going to compare to the original high resolution file. And the only thing that's missing here between this very, very low res that's been converted up is the fine, subtle details that were in the original photograph that AI Gigapixel just simply didn't know was there because, of course, it's so low res to start off with, so it doesn't know that that information would be there. And then finally, let's compare this once again to the new preserved details in Photoshop. So now we're looking at Photoshop's preserved details. And I'm going to show that to you now, actually predominantly here on the little nut, or he's holding in his hand. So as we go back and forth, here is AI Gigapixel. Here is Photoshop's preserved details 2.0. So as we go back and forth, once again, it's very evident that all of these subtle details, for example, if you look over here, as we look across the nut, these fine lines and these subtle kind of like bumps and texture that's there on the nut is not visible in what happens with the preserved details of Photoshop, whereas Gigapixel did find all these wonderful details and it represent, pardon me, actually, let me show it to you that way. There we go. That's what I wanted to show it to you. All right, there we go. So there's AI Gigapixel right there. It's finding all of these subtle details that are there, which obviously in the original one, if you were to look at Photoshop's preserved details, it just blurs all of that out. So once again, here is the AI Gigapixel version, and here's Photoshop's latest preserved details. All right. So now that we've seen some of these comparisons between On1 and Photoshop's latest technology, essentially these images that I've been showing you are pretty high res to start off with. And what really got us excited about this imagination, or the AI being able to hallucinate or imagine these details, is when we got really, really, really close to pixels, to the point where there was only like 4 pixels by 4 pixels, as you can see here on the screen in the center of the console of this car. Now remember, this is all that AI Gigapixel has. This is what AI Gigapixel is imagining is there. Now remember that as we started off this image, we actually started off with a very, very high resolution file. We downscaled it to 1/6 of its original file, and then we used AI Gigapixel to upscale it to what it is now. So as I get close again over here, let me show you that this is what we started off with, only 4 pixels by 4 pixels. And as you kind of squint your eyes and you look at it, like, you know what? That looks like the little icon that would be there for the vents of your car. Sure enough, that's exactly what AI Gigapixel is seeing there. And where things get really scary and like very exciting is when you compare AI Gigapixel to the real information that was in the high-res photo. This is once again another one of those major wow moments. This is what it's imagining it's there, and this is what's exactly there in a file that has 3,600% more information as far as the real high-resolution version of that image. Once again, here's the before, pardon me. This is where we started from, where there's practically nothing there other than 4 pixels by 4 pixels, and this is what it's imagining. That's really, really a wow. And as you zoom out of the thing, it's just amazing the kind of detail that you can preserve by doing that. So in general, AI Gigapixel can be used for images that are going to come from either your DSLR or your mirrorless camera, to be able to take images that are maybe traditionally 30, 40 megapixel images and blow them up to like truly gigapixel resolutions. So you can do prints that could be as large as 10 feet high. So as we continue to play with the applications of AI Gigapixel, the next thing that we started doing was video. So here is a single frame grab from a video file. And one of the nice things about video these days is at 1920 by 1080, or even when people shoot at 4K video, the quality of the video is really, really high. But as you know, if you do a little snapshot of video, here's typically what happens. I'm going to go ahead and actually launch QuickTime here just for a second, so you can see what a typical video file would be like as we try to upscale it. Let's see, Gigapixel. Let me see if I can find that video hanging out here. I don't think I have the video in my folder here, but that's okay. I'll find it probably if I went over my recent files. There we go. That's what I wanted to show you. Wanted to see that file right here. There it is. Perfect. Yes. So there is a lot of beautiful, high quality videos that are out there. And so what I ended up doing was I just essentially pause on any frame of video. And the great thing about Photoshop, about QuickTime is you can just do a Command-C or a Control-C on the PC to copy that frame. Once that frame has been copied, we can switch back over here into Photoshop, just do a new document, and paste in your frame. So for those of you who do any kind of video work, okay, let me make sure I choose my paste over here. Actually, let me do that one more time. Go back, find my frame, copy, go back into here, and do a quick paste. There we go. Just wanted to show you how easy it is to extract a single frame of video from any of the videos that you have. Now, of course, if you start zooming in on that video, you already know what's going to happen. You don't have enough pixels. It's low res. This is the original capture, and this is AI Gigapixel. Oh yeah. So as we look at the original file, of course, we really can't see her ear very well, the contours of her face, her hair, it's all very severely pixelated because we're so heavily zoomed in. Whereas when you look at AI Gigapixel, it's finding all these wonderful details. It's making the correct shape of her ear come out, her eyes, her nose, even the subtle little dimple that's right there on the nose is being just perfectly rendered with AI Gigapixel. So video is definitely one of my favorite applications of AI Gigapixel. But as you continue to investigate all the different things you could do with extra information, probably the first one that's going to come to your mind, or the one that I thought about, was the application of these new 360 panoramic cameras. Now, if you've ever played around with these things, they're awesome. You can either shoot video or stills using a 360 panorama, and even though you only take one shot, you are seeing the world from all around. Okay, up, down, left, right, full 360 panoramas are truly magical. Now, the problem is, unfortunately, even though they do shoot the world from all around, unfortunately, the resolutions of these cameras is not very high, which makes sense because it is really using a sensor to capture such a humongous amount of information. So just to give you a little before and after of what would happen if you do capture images using these panoramic photos or panoramic cameras, you'll zoom in, and as always, you got pixels. That's all you got. That's all the information that's there. And once again, here is AI Gigapixel. And it's been able to intelligently identify the contours and the edges, and it looks at all of the details that are in the photo, and the neural network is able to recreate all this wonderful detail so you can get a much, much higher resolution image from your panoramic cameras than what it would normally be by default. All right, high-res images. This is what we've been using all along. Unfortunately, for many of us that have cameras that might have been older, or if we have images that we have downloaded from the internet, then that's not necessarily what we have. So what I'm going to show you now is a very severe example of what would happen if an image is severely compressed. So as I get close to this, this image originally, once again, was very high res, and I compressed it quite a bit. And I also reduced the size quite a bit. So if we were to zoom in on it, yep, it's pretty bad, because we're seeing that in Photoshop, what I did to actually save out this image is I used the save as command, and I just went under JPEG, and when I chose the save option, I took that quality slider and I brought it all the way down to 0. So it saved out an image for me, which happened to be only 17 kilobytes. That's 17,000 bytes of information for this image. And that's one of the reasons why when you zoom in on it, you realize that it's such a small JPEG that the quality is terrible. So hang on to your computers, because this is AI Gigapixel. Now, this is very, very impressive, mainly because when you look at that really severely compressed file, you're noticing these macro blocking artifacts that tend to discolor the photo and tend to just destroy all the detail in the photograph. Whereas, again, if you squint your eyes and look at it a little bit, you can actually imagine the little knuckles, okay, actually the shading that's on the knuckles. Sure enough, that's exactly what AI Gigapixel saw as well, and that's why it rendered her knuckles perfectly across her hand. As we look at the spacing that's between her fingers, we could see that the compression problem is so bad that it's just totally destroying all the information that's there. Whereas again, Gigapixel is imagining exactly what that would be like, so it's rendering it correctly. Now, as I was playing around with this image, the thing that really caught my eye was when I came down to look at her bracelets. She's got all this wonderful jewelry on. It's very colorful, and colorful things usually give JPEG compression a big problem. And I could see that there was kind of like these bracelets that she has, these pinkish or reddish bracelets, and the JPEG compression just destroys all of the detail that's there. Whereas AI Gigapixel saw that continuity. It understands that it has to present that with this continuous loop, and it's imagining that correctly. Finally, I want to go up to the face, because the face is the most important part of a photo. as we zoom in. All right. Again, really severe compression problems, pixelization because it's really low res. Here is AI Gigapixel. And when I was looking at the face, the first thing that I noticed was this little loop that's going through her nose. The compression is actually destroying that loop, and it's making it look like the loop is actually broken, as if it's opened up someplace. Whereas Gigapixel actually sees that continuity, and it fills that in, so it basically completes the loop. Now, just as a quick comparison of what AI Gigapixel does to the latest version of Photoshop's Preserve Details. Okay, are you ready for this? This is Photoshop Preserve Details. Okay, now keep in mind, this is where we're starting from, right? So all I did is I just simply took that image, I upscaled it using the Photoshop's new Preserve Details 2.0, and this is what we got. And then finally, this is AI Gigapixel. Now, there's really no comparison in how powerful AI Gigapixel is in dealing with severely compressed or very, very noisy images, as it brings all this life out of a photo that you thought was completely unrescuable. Now, one of my favorite applications of this kind of technology, especially when it comes to severely compressed images, is whenever I upload my family photos to Facebook or Instagram or any of the other social media sites. Because every time you upload a photo from your phone to Facebook, not only does it downscale your photograph, but it also compresses the photo a lot. So just to give you a comparison of kind of like the before and after of the photo that I started out with and the photo that I ended up with in Facebook, this photograph came out of my iPhone, and the resolution here is 2016 by 2688. Okay, so we keep that in mind. So it's basically about approximately 2,000 pixels wide. But then when it went to Facebook, now Facebook brought that resolution down. So it's no longer 2,000 pixels wide, it's 1,512 pixels wide. So now not only has it become smaller, but even worse than that is when you zoom in. Because when you do zoom in, you realize, yes, they are doing a lot of JPEG compression. So now here is where AI Gigapixel comes to the rescue. This is after Facebook, and this is AI Gigapixel. Oh my goodness. If you look at the original file here, you can see that we really can't see, for example, the fine little lines of hair that she has right underneath her eyebrows, whereas AI Gigapixel, once again, is correctly imagining these fine little lines of detail, right? Again, once again, there's the before, and here's the after. And what makes things even more interesting is when we compare this image to the original high-resolution file. So now take a look. This is the original photograph that came out of my iPhone, and this is AI Gigapixel. Now, what's surprising about comparing actually what AI Gigapixel does with images in contrast to the original photography is you'll notice that along the way, it looks like AI Gigapixel is actually doing a perfect job of even denoising the photograph. It's as if it's taking anything that could have been wrong with the photo. So if you look at the center of the eye right here, okay, where the shading is right underneath her eyebrow, it looks like there's a lot of noise there just because it's the darker part of the photograph. Whereas after AI Gigapixel has processed it, it has perfectly maintained all the details, and it has gotten rid of the noise, but those details have not gone away. It's almost like as if AI Gigapixel is even kind of denoising your photos, as it's not only upscaling them, and it's even removing the JPEG compression artifacts. So if you ever are in a situation where, let's say you're in a social gathering where people are constantly uploading photos to Facebook, and you really wished you had access to the original high-resolution file, now you don't have to worry about it anymore. Just grab and pull them down from Facebook and use AI Gigapixel for these incredible results. All right. So as I'm constantly looking at some of the examples that I've been working with over the last year or so now, I would say that the first time I was shocked by the AI imagination was when I processed this photograph. I'm going to get, again, really, really close. Yeah, you guessed it. We're going to go into the eye. All right. So if you squint now at this photo, you can actually kind of imagine that you can see the silhouette of the cameraman right inside of the pupil of her eye, and the cameraman has turned the camera on its side, so now it's in portrait mode instead of landscape mode. Well, you guessed it, AI Gigapixel actually sees that silhouette correctly. So it looks like, yeah, it is the silhouette of the cameraman, or the camera person, I should say, holding the camera in that portrait mode on its side to take the photo. Now, the reason why I said this was scary is because I started off with this photograph with a very, very high-res file, and I downscaled it to 600% smaller than the original resolution. So now what I'm going to show you is how does this imagination compare with the real pixels. Here is the real photograph. This is real data, real pixels from a very, very high-res file. As we look at the center of the eye, we could see that, yes, it really is the portrait, I should say, the silhouette of the photographer. And yeah, he really is holding the camera on its side. And when you compare that to what AI Gigapixel imagined, keep in mind, this is all the information that AI Gigapixel has. Very, very low res, but it's doing truly a revolutionary job in imagining that that person in the middle of the eye is holding the camera. Because when you compare it to the real data that was there, it's scary how closely it resembles the real data in high resolution photography. Even when you look at areas that have fine, subtle details, like for example, like the wrinkles, the subtle wrinkles that are on the corner of her eye. If we look at the original high resolution image, we can see that, yes, these fine, subtle details that are right here at the corner of the eye, and how AI Gigapixel is trying to recreate these wrinkles and these texture of the skin just beautifully. All right. Time for playing probably my favorite part of AI Gigapixel, which is enhance the reflection in the eye. So for those of you who are fans of CSI on television, all this stuff is probably reminding you of those episodes of CSI when they're standing behind a computer, and the computer operator zooms in really close on practically no pixels at all. They say, enhance that. And suddenly you hear this, and magically there's some new information there. So I thought this was a great way to show off that capability. This is a photograph from the famous photographer in Australia that photographs reflections in the eyes. His name is Peter Adams-Shawn. He is an incredible artist just because of this unique way of photography in capturing the world of a wedding through the reflections that are in the eye. So as you look at the original image, as we zoom in, as before, we really have a lack of information there, especially when we look at, for example, the lady that's standing up. Okay, we really can't see. We kind of can tell that, yeah, she's maybe helping her friend with her hair, but we really can't see too many details. Whereas AI Gigapixel is seeing all this wonderful detail. It sees her hair, her eye, her ear. We can see that as we look at some of the details of the items that are on the table. In the original photograph, it's just a jumble of pixels. If we can't, even as a human, we really can't differentiate the details that are there. Whereas AI Gigapixel is finding all these wonderful details that makes it look like that's the real items that were photographed in a high-res photo. All right. Let me see if there is one last example that I have for you before I hand it back over to Heath. And this last example goes back to my real passion as I started in computer graphics, and that is in 3D computer graphics. So the image that you're seeing on the screen right now is actually not a photograph, but it is a three-dimensional computer graphics render. So as you can see here from the left-hand side, all of the textures have been removed from the geometry. So for those of you who are interested in 3D computer graphics, essentially you're seeing the world or the 3D environment rendered without any of the textures. The image that you see in the middle is being rendered at 50% the final resolution that I want. So let's say, for example, if I wanted to create a render that was going to be at 4,000 by 4,000, I simply ask the computer to render at half that resolution, which is going to be 2,000 by 2,000. I then ask AI Gigapixel, I just upscale and using AI Gigapixel to 200% of the original resolution. And what's really amazing about this is as through all the testing that we have done, we realized that upscaling at 200% is practically identical to rendering at that high resolution. And as a major bonus, you are now rendering 400 times faster than you would normally, because obviously you are rendering a quarter the number of pixels. So for those of you who are interested in computer graphics and who have to deliver these really beautiful, high quality renders, either for yourself or for your clients, definitely keep AI Gigapixel in mind the next time you have to produce very high resolution results for your clients. All right, let's see if I've got a nice example that is for people to do any kind of architectural photography. Another one of the photos that I started off with as I was playing around with the new AI technology. And again, we're going to get really, really close. And in this case, when I got close here to the corner of the window, the pixels are so less, so few pixels that are there, you really can't see that this is the metal framing that's supposed to hold up these little triangular pans of glass. Whereas AI Gigapixel is actually imagining that detail correctly there. I'm going to show that to you one more time. This is the very, very low res that we're starting off from. And this is AI Gigapixel. Now, as I went further up through the building, I remember that as I was looking at the really, really low res file, I zoomed in on this structure over here, which kind of looks like an antenna of some sort, or some piece of equipment. And here along the right-hand side, there is somewhat like a dish of some sort, like a radio dish, or just a dish in general, where suddenly, once AI Gigapixel was done with it, there's all these little tiny mechanical details that it's imagining is there in the photo, like a platform that's here, or a cable that's wrapping around that antenna. As it's looking at the curvature of this kind of radar dish or the circular dish, very, very few pixels that are there, and AI Gigapixel is representing that dish so beautifully with all the fine details. So once again, essentially, this is the before, where we have very few pixels, and that is AI Gigapixel. And so at this point, I'm gonna hand it back over to Heath.
Well, then, without any further ado, if you'd like to learn any more, you can go to the Topaz website Gigapixel page at topazlabs.com/AI-Gigapixel. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/TopazLabs. You can visit our forums to discuss Topaz products with other Topaz users, get tips, tricks, even talk to some of our team members. A lot of them are fairly active on the forums at discuss.topazlabs.com. And if you need any help, I know Rose jumped in the middle to talk about the system requirements. I'll be including that in the follow-up email after this presentation. You can go to help.topazlabs.com. If you have any questions, you can always contact us at webinars@topazlabs.com, and you can sign up for upcoming webinars. I think it's Rad Drew coming with us next week to go over some of the different AI products that we have and how they apply to his workflow. You can sign up for that at topazlabs.com/webinars. Greg, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to present. I know you had a lot of great examples this time, and I really like the comparison because, AI Gigapixel, it's an AI product. Sure, that's a big deal, but Photoshop has its own AI product. It's really good to see that comparison between what Adobe's putting out and what Gigapixel's putting out. We seem to have a much better quality result. I wonder why that is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Gigapixel is squeezing it's doing 1 to 2 million calculations per pixel. So it's really squeezing out a tremendous amount of quality because it's so advanced and so much work has gone into developing that AI model.
Yeah, if you guys, actually, we have a blog about that from our CEO. If you check out the blog, that's topazlabs.com/blog. It's called A Gigapixel Story. And it was written by our CEO to describe what he saw when he was first looking into this technology and how we used it to generate the products. If you want to know a little bit about how that product came about, check that blog out. And Greg, we'll have to have you back soon. I know we're booked through the end of October, or no, through the rest of December, but hopefully we can get you back sometime in October to present again. I really love your presentations.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I would love to come back.
Cool.
I love doing this.
Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Greg, thanks again. And be sure to have a good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are.
Yes. Thank you, everybody. And thanks to you, Heath.